And good evening. Welcome to City Focus. I'm Marty Olsen, your host, and tonight I'd like to welcome back my good friend and yours, Tony D'Angelo. Tony, welcome back.
Welcome. So nice of you to invite me once again.
Well, you know, we've got an election in a couple of weeks, and I thought it'd be most appropriate to have you come down and offer your thoughts on what's transpiring at all levels, from top to bottom. And,
well, as I explained on the way in, I'm not the vice president, so you can ask me anything. You may not like the answer, but well, you may. Some others may.
I roll pretty good. Have you voted?
You know, I debate. There is a sign up in the Pomfret Town Hall for early voting. Now, I'm of the understanding that this is a paper ballot, but apparently it may be a machine ballot. I want to vote in the machine, and I'll tell you why. Because when we voted in 2022, when I put my filled-in card, the ballot, into the machine, the clicker didn't move. And I called somebody over and I said, the clicker didn't move. Oh, it'll be fine. And then there was all these issues as far as, were these ballots counted? Were they switched? Were they this? I want to do it. If I can do it early, I'll do it, but I want to do it in the machine. And I want to see the clicker move, basically. I want my vote to count.
Yeah, well, I think we all do.
Yeah.
Those of us who are citizens and registered.
Isn't that a prerequisite for voting?
Well, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, these days we really don't know.
There seems to be a push for those who are not citizens to exercise the same franchise. I have an issue with that myself.
Yeah, you, me both.
But in your background with business and economics and politics, I really wanted to open with the Democratic candidate, Ms. Harris, when asked about what she's going to do with the economy, she raises her hand and says, I have a plan, and it's called an opportunity economy. Now, perhaps you can share with the audience what that is.
I have not.
What it means.
I have not heard the articulation of that. So I know probably as little as anyone else does. I am of the impression somehow I think opportunity equals equity, and those things which she is suggesting. $25,000 home down payment to everybody on the planet, which would be an economics disaster. You know, that was tried before. Barack Obama tried that in 2010 to jumpstart the economy after the financial crisis. It was a disaster. It was like, you know, that and cash for clunkers were like the two worst things ever, forever. And then because they just didn't work, they just distorted the market, and when that happened, everything became confused after that. The other thing is, which I think is, pardon the term, racist, a loan to business people of color or businessmen of color. Targeting
about being racist, it's illegal.
Well, yeah, it violates every single fair lending thing known to mankind. And then she said, we'll take that and they can start up cannabis businesses. So of course she's thinking about legalized marijuana. Now imagine how much fun that will be. We have enough problems in this state, you know, getting on the interstates and people are high and drunk and speeding all over the place. Imagine that across all 50 states. And then the other thing is this bulbous, I'm not opposed to helping out families, but this bulbous child care credit. for kids, to the point where you have to say, hey, is it worth me having a kid so I can get the money, which is really the wrong motivation. That all comes across, and then you say, well, is the opportunity economy, we're just going to throw money at people and give them an opportunity, and that's not going to sustain. There's nothing in there that I see that would be an incentive to produce, which you have to produce in order to have an economy.
Yeah, well, I have an economics degree at the bachelor degree level and a master's in business, and I've run a business.
You went to one of those schools I couldn't get into, but please continue.
Well, the point being is, I don't recall in any of the economics classes that I took that the term opportunity economy ever surfaced. So I think this is a brand new one, and if she's made it up and she makes it singular, I call it, and she raises her hand. I mean, I'm not overdoing this. I call this an opportunity economy, and nobody is coming out in any of the news forums that I see explaining what this means. I mean, you maybe have done a better job here, but you're not seeing any of her surrogates or folks working with her going to the wall and describing what an opportunity economy is.
I could probably go on for days, but I do have several concerns. My concern is that I don't think it's first thing you say is it's a close race. Well, why is it a close race? Because there are a lot of people out there that think that Donald Trump is the most evil man that ever walked the earth. We know he's not a perfect man, but he's an adulterer. He's a felon. He's a crook. He's a this. He's a that. And we don't want the character of that kind of man in office. You have that whole thing and that whole spectrum.
Even if much of that, at least from where I sit, is political fabrication.
Oh, sure it is. Oh, sure it is. But yet it's the kind of thing where you have very intelligent people who are now looking at it and saying, well, is it really true that he's not going to leave the White House if he comes in? These are the conversations I hear from people. Then, so you have this whole kind of thing of, one of the reasonings I've heard, Marty, from a very good friend who's different than I am. He's a Jewish man, he's a labor lawyer, but we get along, we discuss things. Maybe not agreeing entirely on the solutions, is he would believe, and take him and put him in a whole bunch of other people of similar body and mind suit, that when Harris gets in, he says, she's not competent, he tells me. She's not capable, of course she isn't, but she'll rely on the judgments of people who are, and she will listen, and it will be better for us all. There are people that are convinced of that. I don't agree with that in the least. I think she's just so dumbly arrogant, nobody's going to tell her what to do. And that's the scary thing. So that's going to bring it closer. Now, when it comes to the Republican Party, the national and local, I think they are, pardon the term, in my best King's English, freaking idiots for not looking at Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, Maine. There's a lot of Trump support. I mean, I drove my wife Kathy up to a party in Maine, family party on Sunday. And I mean, listen, I follow the Groucho Marx theory of life. You learn a lot by seeing what the price of pumpernickel bread does. And so I drove her up because her leg is healing, and I didn't want her on a long trip by herself. So what did I see on the road? Trump signs, Massachusetts, Maine. And I didn't see any Harris wall stickers. So it's like you have this groundswell of support, but yet I think it's like this, I don't think I know. If you take Connecticut, it's this thing of like, you're not supposed to be looking at that. You're not supposed to be seeing that. It's almost like a parent with a kid with a dirty book or something. Put that away. And it's that if this thing gets down really close, if it gets down to a few votes here or there, you're going to be very sorry you didn't, and you'll lose. You didn't get those 5. You didn't get those 6. And I just, 1 day, 2 days, what a jolt that would send. It would be a psychological thing. You know, it would be like Doolittle's Raiders during the Second World War. One of the best movies I've ever seen, 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, Van Johnson, and the story of Doolittle's Raiders. A bunch of guys got in a bunch of planes. Actually, I'm sort of colloquializing it, and went to bomb Japan in 1942. Maybe they'd live, maybe they wouldn't. Maybe it would be successful, maybe it wouldn't. But they wanted to show Japan that we could hit you with a bomb. Now think of what would happen in Connecticut. It's like we could hit you with a Trump bomb. Think of the outcry. It would be, you know, you could not buy enough popcorn to watch this. It would be totally hysterical. But it's like, and I don't, my concern is, Marty, I will call that mismanagement. I will call that not seeing the whole field. I do have a concern in not seeing the whole field, that they're so focused on Pennsylvania. People are voting early in Pennsylvania. Okay, branch out a little bit. Ain't gonna hurt you, ain't gonna kill you, ain't gonna cost a whole lot.
Well, you know, I do think that the Trump has been going into areas that are not traditional Republican areas.
He's certainly open.
I mean, whether it's you know, in the Bronx,
New Jersey,
New Jersey, California,
Nassau County, Long Island.
I mean, he's been going into places and being extraordinarily well received.
Well, he'll go where you invite him.
Is it enough for him to get over the top? I don't know. If I was operating on the other side, I would be concerned.
Well, he's also coming to Madison Square Garden. You know, and I guess it's going to be Sunday night or something like that. I mean, that is like, we're prosecuting this man for felonies here, and he's going to hold a rally in Madison. And what's going to happen? This is going to be the loopy doopies of the world will play this as the reincarnation of Hitler coming to Madison Square Garden in 1939. That's where this is. And it'll be, you have to vote for us. This man is Hitler. Look at what he's doing. So I have a concern. I don't think it's going to be this. I would like to see it over and over early and too big to rig. But I think even if it is, if I am hopelessly pessimistic, it's a whole lot better. You're going to watch 72 days of God knows what from God knows whom.
I'm you know, Connecticut is an echo chamber for the Democrats. I mean,
it's the test kitchen.
And New London, where I live, is hyperventilating echo chamber in that regard. But I sense outside of the echo chamber in other parts of the country that the support for Trump is strong.
Extremely.
And that his partisans are just that, and they're hardcore, and they will go out and vote. And that the support that Harris has, to me, appears to be primarily hostility towards Trump more than it is. I think that Harris is a good candidate and will do a good job.
I believe it's that. I believe you're correct. I also believe it's this thing of their thing of turning the page, and it's time to move on. And what they're really saying is away from, you know, the stale old white man model to the nouveau woman of color model, which of course is race-based politics to its core. But there's also that
the Democratic politics.
Yeah.
I mean, race-based and division
Right.
is their mantra.
Yeah, and basically there's that kind of thing like, well, let's get away from the ugliness which has caused us all these problems. Now you hear this from people with houses that are 3 times bigger than mine, with cars that are 13 years newer than mine, and life has been so cruel to them.
So I mean, I think that I'm you and I discussed this over dinner, but I mean I sense an electoral landslide.
I hope you're right.
I really do.
I hope you're right.
and that
For the sake of the
with
country.
this, Trump is going to be pulling in some folks on the under ticket as well, Senate and Congress.
Well, and,
To what degree? I haven't been following
But aren't
close enough, but it just that's my take.
But aren't these missed opportunities for so many? I mean, you're never going to catch a wave like you have now with Trump. There's never been that level of genuine dissatisfaction, leaving aside the confused and the people who were just hopelessly somewhere thinking Trump is the most evil man on earth. I don't understand why there isn't this, how could I put it, this appreciation for the Trump policies, low taxes, energy policy, a secure border.
It's personal.
It's purely personal.
It has nothing to do with policy. It's personal.
And it's somebody's or a number of people's personal feelings getting in the way of really what could be the difference between the United States of America and something else.
Well, that's a frightening thought.
Isn't it? Isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Harris to me represents the hard shift towards socialism, globalism, more so with Obama, and taking that to the next level, communism.
Well, one of the things I was reading today on Twitter, and you can't, how could I put it? There's a lot of news on Twitter, and you have to learn to test what's true and what isn't. But reading in several places of people saying that the Border Patrol, the actual Border Patrol agents who are working the border, that if Harris is elected, a number of them will just quit. They've had it. They're not going to put up with what they've been putting up with for 4 years. And I mean, that to me is, number one, is a very plausible thing, a very believable thing, and really a scary thing.
Well, think about this with the sanctuary states and more so sanctuary cities, which when this was being initiated 5 or 6 years ago or thereabouts, it all just sounded so beautiful. We're treating these migrants civilly and nicely and humanely and welcome. We want you here and you're safe, and we won't allow the bad big brother from Washington to come in here and take you away. You've got protection. And now, lo and behold, look what's happening to the mayor of New York, who's had the audacity, and he was a major league proponent of all this stuff.
Yes, he was.
Where he's kind of going, enough is enough. We can't handle this. This isn't working. And now he's been prosecuted. He's been prosecuted. This is amazing.
Well,
it's like, Trump too, but to a Democrat, because he had a chance. He's had the audacity to stand up to the man.
I don't think, it's an interesting point you make, because I don't think the people or the mayors who made this thing of we welcome all really imagined the horrors that would be created. Like I was working in New Haven the day that John DeStefano in New Haven became the mayor of New Haven, the first, whatever you want to call it, sanctuary city mayor, by inviting all of the illegals to come into New Haven. He gave them, I think, some sort of a care package or an ID card. And the line, I remember that day, went from Church and Elm in New Haven all the way back to probably George and Church, like a mile and a half. They were coming from all over. And it was this thing of, I think he thought it was great, but yet this, whatever you want to call it, I mean, I would call him put it this way, sort of like for the day, a mainstream Democrat. He couldn't put up with the mess that, like, he himself, or perhaps an Eric Adams, thought was a great idea. I mean, it's just basically, it's like way out of control. Yeah, we do need legal immigration, and we do want to be the land of opportunity, but it's...
And I think that most Americans support legal immigration. Is the system currently in place perfect? Hardly. But if you don't like the system, you don't open the border.
No. Well,
You change the laws. And you don't do it 6 months before the election and cry wolf. I mean, if the Biden administration, Biden-Harris administration, was not happy with what they were handed by the Trump administration, it would have served them well to have tackled that at the beginning of their administration, not opening the borders and not waiting until the end of the administration and playing politics with it.
For certain. And it's a total and complete shame because we've invited in people. Now, people wanting to come to work and travel miles and miles and miles and miles to do it, I mean, let them work. You know, we don't have enough good working Americans today, especially in young people. We just don't have it. But it's like, just don't have them come here and vegetate and effectively become casualties of the system. We have enough casualties of the system. We don't need any more.
Well, I mean, I would argue that what the Biden administration has done regarding immigration and the open border on the South is really, it's treasonous. It's beyond, malfeasance. It's treason. I mean, their job is to uphold the law, not to, openly abuse it.
Well, and how many times do you see that today? The Constitution, the statutes, the regulations, regardless. I mean, I see this in, from where I work. I see it in, quote unquote, if you want to call me an ardent observer of the news scene, and it's like, well, you're breaking the law. Well, so they really feel that what they're doing is God's work, and they're just going to keep doing it. Doesn't matter how much I lie, doesn't matter how much I cheat, doesn't matter how foolish I looked yesterday. Today is a new day, and I can be Tim Walz and say I'm a knucklehead, and you're going to love me anyway. And isn't it all about getting rid of Donald Trump and turning the page, not because of some dumb mistake? I mean, now the dumb mistake he made could have been, felonious or perjurious or so what? Who cares?
I mean, I am absolutely flabbergasted at that Trump has been able to withstand.
It is an amazing testament.
The amount of abuse that he has tolerated since he came down the escalator. It's been nonstop, and he hasn't buckled or knuckled under.
And before he ran, he was everybody's friend. He was a wonderful guy.
On both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
As a businessman, that was good business.
And how could I put it? I think it speaks to a different era, and I think it speaks to a way different maturity and a way different acuity, to where now you look at people proposing solutions. And I look at these solutions like, that was tried 45 years ago. It was a disaster. It's not going to work. It was tried by much better people than the people who think now it's the greatest thing that ever happened. And they're going to throw more money and more time at it. It's still going to crash. But Trump worked, I mean, he worked within New York. I mean, the Trumps and the Cuomos, I mean, the ironic thing, but I think it maybe not so ironic depending on how you look at it. Fred Trump and Mario Cuomo were dear friends. Mario Cuomo represented Fred Trump, represented the Trump organization. It was like, you had relationships and people saw the greater good in something they may do. Now, to your point, it's like, well, this is a good thing. Well, no, we're not going to do it because Trump suggested it.
Yeah.
It's garbage. It's total garbage. And my concern is we may lose the country over, garbage thinking like that.
Yeah. Well, I think there's been a level, I'm going to call it, and I'm praying, that maturity.
That's a good word.
That, Reagan was not warmly embraced when he was initially elected. I mean,
No.
he was called all sorts of names. And, fright-mongering, warmonger, voodoo economics. For my money, anyway, in my lifetime, He's the greatest president in America in my 70 years on the planet. And there's a reason why a guy like Reagan was able to come to the fore, and people tend to dismiss or forget that he replaced Jimmy Carter. I mean, that assisted his ability to rise, was the ineptness and incompetence of Carter and the Democratic Party at that time.
It was, Reagan brought a different flavor to things.
Positive.
And he was able to, well, then I think people were better. I mean, look at what he was able to do in New York, because he and Ed Koch worked together. They had a great respect. And really a lot of that was just fostered on veneration of the Holy Land, defense of Israel. And the Reagan and Tip O'Neill had a great relationship. Disagreed, but they did pass legislation, and they did work towards the common good, you know, albeit with, and you know, maybe the laws passed weren't perfect, but it's that, and with the dopey stuff you have going on now in the Congress and Senate, like we were talking earlier about, Trump wins, isn't this great? Fantastic. We're going to get the country back. Well, okay, maybe not so easy, not so fast. What if we have a Democrat-led Senate and a Republican Congress? Gridlock. What if we have it the other way? Gridlock. What are we going to do about border legislation? Gridlock. What are we going to do about anything like other than administrative stuff? Gridlock. And these are the things that really would concern me, because it would take a lot longer for things to actually work, and that's when
you start seeing the use of executive orders, and I'm not a proponent of that.
Neither am I.
I mean, the system is supposed to work legislatively with the two houses of Congress working together, submitting jointly approved legislation, sending it up to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue for either a signature or a veto.
Yeah. Neither am I, and that's the thing that, you know, there's going to be a whole, you know, pardon the term, afterbirth thing here, first in the 72 days between Election Day and Inauguration Day, and then after that, depending on, because there's probably going to be a whole lot of other contested seats throughout the country.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I think that for conversational purposes, if Trump's successful and wins, and if the Democrats, the current lame duck Congress, decides to act, I will call it irresponsibly, in their lame duck session, I think that will come back and bite the Democrats, who would be in the minority position in the backside.
Oh, I think so.
I mean, I think that would be, I don't think that the overall general public would look at that favorably. There may be some wingnuts on the extreme.
Well, and we were talking earlier before we came out here about extremes, and marvel not if somehow win, lose, or draw, Kamala Harris becomes the President of the United States before January 20th. And for two reasons. Number one, because regardless of what happens, there will be the first black woman of color president, never won a vote, never fired a shot, has been totally incompetent in everything she's done, but she would be the first black woman president or woman of color. And the other thing is that would save her from having to bang the gavel to admit Trump. And that's,
as the president of the Senate.
As the president, yeah, exactly. And that would, and then whomever she would appoint to be her vice president, probably Elmer Fudd Walls. I don't know, but just basically, I think, you know, you may, and if there's a fight, if you will, if they're still fighting over votes, it would fortify her position of strength as the sitting president. Oh boy, and don't put it past them. They are slimy buggers.
Well, they certainly have utilized an awful lot of time for the last 4 years going after Trump as opposed to worrying about the people they're supposed elected to serve.
Well, I was talking about this with my friend Bob Swick, the economist. I said, when did incompetence become acceptable? When did incompetence become an art form? When, or the unaccountability for incompetence became, so what? For months I've been up and down our sitting Congressman Joe Courtney for blowing the disaster declaration for Windham County. And that's where you need for tax purposes, you need a federally declared disaster to allow more time for people to file and pay. And the people in New London County where we sit, they got that. They got the stay of execution. I believe it was 60 days. But for some reason, the good old white folks in Windham County didn't get it. And then you ask yourself, well, why? Is it because he hates us? Or he's incompetent, or his office is incompetent? They don't know how to check a box or read the Federal Register? But it's like, and it's like, there's never any, the only person accounting on that to him is me, the hacked off practitioner. And it's like, and you see so much of that, and you see so much, and it's almost like picking on Joe Courtney, because there's so many freaking incompetent politicians that just do things. We were talking about Martha Marks earlier, ripping out the phone cords. I mean, that's felony. It's a felony in Connecticut. Sorry, it's in the book. I didn't write the book. It's in the book.
Yeah. And the day paper, in their infinite wisdom, endorsed her.
So what?
So their editorial boards kind of show their moronic side there.
Well, but it's, Marty, it's just this thing of, well, so what if they broke a law or they didn't? That used to be like curtains. You were the incompetent politician. You did not execute. You must leave office. Now it's like, you got to elect me, because if you don't elect me, you get somebody like Trump. Be funny.
Well, there are other elections going on besides the top of the ticket, and here in Connecticut, our senatorial race is not generating very much juice between the incumbent Murphy and Mr. Carey. Corey.
Yeah.
See, I mean, that's
indicative, and that's indicative. This, I think, is a good man who's unfortunately not seeing the forest through the trees, fighting the wrong fight, which is legendary for Connecticut Republicans. The wrong fight at the wrong. It's almost like a Connecticut candidate wants, more cases than not, wants to run the race so Democrats will accept him. And I was reading today on Twitter, and Matt Corey says, well, I've got 2 radio ads, coming up. This is a step in the right direction. And believe me, I'm a fan of radio ads. Our very good friends eat dinner because of radio ads. So, John Fuller loves radio ads. I get that. That's the lifeblood of a radio station. But I'm saying this has got to be the most mismanaged approach. This is a guy who should have gone immediately to the alternative sites, the non-traditional means, the people that would project his message at a much lower cost and a much better thing. And I mean, he sends a lot of great tweets out against, Chris Murphy. Believe me, Matt Corey does not want Chris Murphy out 25%, nearly as much as I might want Chris Murphy out. But it's like they'll use the traditional means to get to the same place, which is always coming up short. And this is the thing that you're not going to win the fight doing. What did Ross Perot say? Insanity is trying to do the same thing twice and expecting a different result. Well,
I think that even goes back to Einstein.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's sad because Chris Murphy's not a liked man. He's not a respected man. And any sort of aggressive campaign poking at every single one of his shortcomings, personal, professional, and legislatively. I mean, you knock him out of the box, and that's why, there was my devout group on Twitter, of which I'm not a party person, but I read, I follow, necessary, or if so moved, I contribute something. These people tried very hard to get Donald Trump to come to Connecticut, and there's no. The reason is Donald Trump's not going to come to Connecticut because he doesn't think anybody wants him in Connecticut. And that's really the sad thing. But what a boost that would be for Matt Corey. And just that alignment. I mean, you got Murphy out of the box if you do it. And honestly, truthfully, this would be a public service to the United States of America to get that jerk packing. He's number one, he's unhinged. Number two, he just goes off in these babbling fits. He thinks he's seeing Donald Trump under the bed. It's unbelievable. It's like, I don't get it.
Well, some of these guys, I remember years ago, when Sam Gagenson was congressman from this
district. The colonel
mentions
him,
before Rob Simmons. And he had a long run, and but he made his living banging on Republican presidents. That's what he did. He didn't do much for the district. He was, except he would vote for EB submarines because it was in his district.
Yeah.
I suspect if it was not in his district, he would be voting against them. And
very similar to another gentleman we know. Right?
Well, that's true. And I'm just curious to see how this plays out as well when with Mike France, who's a good, solid guy.
Yeah, he certainly is.
And I've got my fingers crossed, and he certainly has my vote.
It's certainly the strongest, most aggressive campaign I have seen in Connecticut. Just as far as I'll drive in the car. You never, ever, ever used to see any Republicans for Congress signs driving around Pomfret and Brooklyn or going into Putnam. Now you're seeing a lot of signs for Mike, and that's good. That's good. One right down in the intersection from where I live.
Yeah. Well, from what I glean, and you may know better because I don't spend an exorbitant amount of time in your part of the state, is that Trump has done in his elections better a little further north than he has down here in the southeastern part of the district.
I think it's divided, Marty, between those that actually work away from the government as opposed to those somehow who are tied to the government by means of employment. It's driving around Pomfret, the biggest houses to me, which would be mansions, if they do have signs, Harris Walls. You know why? Because it's people that work for the state or teach in the universities, and that's their gravy train. That's how their bread gets buttered. Get a little bit south, get out to the Abington part of Pomfret, or get to Brooklyn or something like that, and you'll see a lot more Trump signs. So that's the division. And it's not a heavily populated area. Now, if you go into quote unquote the city, which would be Putnam, you would see mostly Joe Courtney, because Joe Courtney's very good with packing the knapsack full of goodies 3 months before the election and going for the photo op.
But isn't he? He's from Vernon, isn't he?
I believe
or that
he is.
area.
Yeah, I believe he is.
So he's from that part of the state.
Yeah. But he's, he gets his picture. I'll open up the Woodstock Villager, and there's Courtney, doing some little glad-handed thing. And they're very good at glad-handing when the game gets close, and that often wins them elections. And they've got the gold, so they're making the rules. It's golden rule.
Yeah. Well, I've got my fingers crossed for Mike France. I think Courtney's been in there now. I think this is going to be his 10th term if he wins. So it's 18, 20 years.
Enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
Yeah. It would be great to have a congressman where if there's an issue or you see something that you'd like to get more of a participation on, or this affects my district, this affects my neighborhood, this affects my clients, and to actually get a response and a dialogue and information. To use the Italian term, we get ugats from Courtney, basically. Just nothing, and it's somehow it's whatever benefit he may provide, certainly doesn't benefit me.
Yeah. And then we trickle down. I mean, down here in southeastern Connecticut, at least in New London, my state rep, who Chris, I think her last name is Conley. I've never met her. I mean, she could knock on my door, and I won't know who she is, and I'm active.
Yeah.
And she represents primarily Groton and then a sliver of New London. And then the GOP has put up a candidate who I've met once, months ago, at a function for a few minutes, and has not been, like I said, I wouldn't know her if she showed up at my door. And these are your choices at this level, and it's disheartening. You'd like to have a bit more vitality from somebody than just a few yard signs. And I don't necessarily think that that's the best way to be electing
It's certainly not the most helpful.
your representatives.
It's certainly not the most helpful, for sure.
You know.
But it's...
And the gentleman who's got the bulk of New London, Anthony Nolan, I mean, he's a rubber stamp for the Democratic leadership. I mean, he hasn't had an original thought in his tenure in Hartford, other than to rename the Thames River.
Meeting beloved Carter a couple of weeks back, she's a lovely, lovely, lovely woman, and she was doing an interview with Lee, and I was listening, and we were chatting, and it's like I sort of gave her my get out of the box lecture, and she said, "You need to tell me more about that." I said, "Well, don't be like all these other guys, beloved, who want to campaign so that they're accepted to their opponents. Tell it like it is. Tell it exactly the way it is, because if the good people like that," and she's doing a great job, don't get me wrong, but if good people don't speak up and say, we die in a sea of ignorance every single day.
Yeah, but it's I think it's unfortunate that as you come down the food chain, from president down to at this level, to our state reps, municipals are next year. How you know less and less about the people who are closest to you.
Yeah, it's
what they're doing or why, and who's pushing their buttons, and what they bring to the table. What are their qualifications? And why should I vote for so and so?
And it's I know me, myself, and I get very little, shall I say, good contrary information to the Democratic stronghold locally that I live under personally, or with.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to just touch on that we didn't get into earlier before we run out of time, because I think it's important, and that is what's going on in the Mideast, as well as Ukraine, and as well as Xi playing footsies in Taiwan here. I mean, we seem to be hovering on the cusp of World War III. And I'm not sure if the incumbent vice president, is up to that challenge. Or may exacerbate it due to weakness.
I think the evil parties that are involved in all those situations are looking at her and they're salivating. They're like, America's ripe for the taking, because this is a person who can't execute, can't articulate anything, really has no leadership skills whatsoever, and it's entirely out of her element if something like that happens, and will not know what to do. And yeah, that's very, very, very. That's beyond concerning. I mean, that's worrisome.
I think that we're there now due to the ineptness and weakness of Biden.
Well, we certainly got there because of it, yeah.
and I think it'll get worse if we have a continuation
Well,
of that type of leadership and also the policies emanating thereof. And in the Mideast in particular, you can't play both sides against the middle. I mean, either you're with Israel or you're not.
no.
And they're trying to kiss the behind of our friends, Omar and Rashida Tlaib and others, and within their own party at the expense of America.
There is a biblical truth based on support of Israel. He who benefits Israel will benefit him. So I could go through a litany of scriptures if I could remember half of them. But when you start to pull away from that, you're really walking on thin ice. You really are. And I mean, don't quarrel with me. Quarrel with God. That's how he wrote the book.
Yeah. I mean, Netanyahu, for my money, this guy is a straight shooter. He's honest as the day is long, and his objectives and goals for Israel and how he's planning to effectuate them. He's been straight up front, and the guy's brilliant. I mean, and I think that, and he doesn't take anything. I mean, he'll be polite in diplomatic forums, but he doesn't knuckle under.
No, he doesn't. And I do believe that if Israel had a greater, shall we say, commitment and concern from the United States, this mess wouldn't be dragging on for as long as it does. It's almost like Netanyahu is like, you got my back, right? You always had my, well, yeah, we got your back. It's that kind of thing.
Well, listen, Trump at the end of his initial administration was able to negotiate the Abraham Accords. And he loses, and the stuff hits the fan.
Yeah.
And I suspect when Trump comes back in, you'll start to see things tighten up.
Oh, I certainly think so, because Trump has a loyalty towards the Jewish people. And many of his friends, in life and business are Jewish people. And I mean, honestly, truthfully, if you were around in those days in New York, those were the people whom had the influence. So he learned through his father. You learn to work with these people, and he developed a respect for them.
And then up north in Ukraine, I mean, you didn't see Putin fiddling around during Trump's administration.
No,
I mean,
right.
he saw weakness in Obama and moved, and he sees weakness with Biden, and he has moved. And if you were to see Harris in there, I think you'll see it'll get more horrific than what we see now.
I'll use the term that Ronald Reagan used to describe the Jimmy Carter presidency after he had the fight with Jerry Ford in 1976 about who was going to be president. Unthinkable. A Harris presidency for the security of the United States of America would be unthinkable, unimaginable. I don't believe that she will listen to people telling her what she should do. She will do what she herself thinks she should do, and that is frightening in and of itself.
Well, I mean, I think it's evident right now with how she's playing footsies with our adversaries in the Mideast and beyond. And you have Biden behind her. We need to negotiate.
Well, she's trying to appear cool to the I Hate Israel crowd, which is despicable.
Yeah. So, well, we've got an election in 2 weeks. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
People are starting to vote, and I haven't decided whether I'll vote early or wait till Election Day. I tend to be more traditional, but.
If I can vote, using electronic means, I'll do it early.
But I would encourage everybody who's watching tonight, and we'll pick the program up on YouTube and listen to the program, to get out and vote. Do your civic duty. It's very, very important whether you agree with our discussion or not. Go out and do what you think is right, and exercise your franchise. And that's one of the prime things that makes America great.
Well, and never be in a situation where you can't do that, and that's my biggest thing. I want people to have dissenting opinions and to disagree, but to be available to have the forum to do that. We're coming to a place in America where that may not be the case. To your point, we need to vote.
Yep.
Preserve those rights.
And just a quick plug, next Thursday morning on the 31st, Halloween, I will be a guest on Lee's program at 6:30 in the morning. He's having me on for a little pre-election discussion, and then the following week, which is a little unusual, he'll have me back after the election we can discuss the results. So I'm looking forward to that.
I am too.
So I always enjoy having the opportunity to go on, Lee, and also to listen to you on Tuesday mornings at 7 o'clock. Well, folks, you've been listening and watching City Focus. Tony D's been my guest. Tony, thanks a bunch.
Thanks so much.
And folks, get out and vote. We'll see you next week on City Focus. Good night.